Okay, we're all set. We're all live.
Okay, well, thank you, Tina.
Mhm.
I want to call this meeting to order, the Board of Physicians meeting of May 16th, 2025. And we're going to, we have one petition to take up and some introductions prior to that and just kind of general housekeeping stuff. But in that vein, I will call the attendance, or actually just Tina, do you want to take the roll, or just note that there are four of the members here and then four who have not been able to join us for the minutes?
Sure, I can. So we have Dr. Salner and Dr. Zimsky and Dr. Prywetz and Dr. Berry are on. So we have our we have our four. We have our four that we need. Dr. I think it's Dr. DeSouza and I think the other three will not be attending. So we have our four. Mm-hmm.
Koss, Perlson, and Carlesi.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. And then for the minutes from our last meeting, which was actually looks like about a year ago, June 7th, 2024, I trust that everyone has received a copy of that and hope that you have been able to review it and would accept any motions to approve those.
So moved.
And a second? Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so the minutes are adopted from June 7th, 2024. Now, I think that you may have heard or read that our drug control division has grown very rapidly over the past couple of years with the expansion of the adult use cannabis. And therefore, we found it better to manage by having the pharmacy side managed by Rod Marriott and Lila McKinley, who you may know, who has been with the agency for 10 plus years as an attorney and kind of grew up in the medical marijuana side of it and has been with the legal team on the adult use side of it, is now the director of the cannabis program, both medical and adult use. And so, I wanted to introduce her to you formally, and she's going to have some updates and stats from the program. So thank you, Lila, and she's doing a terrific job, and we really appreciate everything.
Hi, I'm Lila McKinley. I think that I've met a few of you, or at least talked to a few of you via email. So it's either great to meet you or nice to see faces again. So I'm really excited for this opportunity. And as the commissioner said, I did grow up in the medical program. It was coming online when I started, and I sort of stayed with it for kind of the whole genesis into adult use. I do have some program updates for you. That's numbers, statistics, so not super interesting, but nevertheless. So I just wanted to kind of run through the number of registered practitioners that we have right now, which is 1,892. Our number of registered patients is 34,006. Our number of hybrid dispensaries, and those are essentially both adult use and medical facilities, so they serve our medical community, is now up to 35. And in addition to the 4 original medical producers that we had with our medical program, we now have some more growers online. We have 2 cultivators and we have 6 micro cultivators. And so the addition of those new cultivation facilities and growers will certainly help with our supply and our supply to the medical community as well. So that's my program update. Thanks so much for listening, and I will turn it back over to the commissioner.
Thank you very much. So if there are no, see here, so the next order of business is the review of the petition. So there is one petition, and I understand that the petitioner is not able to join us So it is for a debilitating condition of medullary sponge kidney disease. And the petitioner did provide the definition, just for the record, and any of those who are joining us that aren't doctors or on the board, it is a rare congenital disorder where small cysts form in the kidneys, possibly leading to urinary tract infections and kidney stones. And I would first ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to give any testimony regarding this condition. Is there anyone who has joined other than the board that would like to give any testimony regarding the condition that is a subject of this petition? All right, well, seeing none, I would then ask the board if they would like to entertain a discussion regarding this petition.
Yes.
Okay, so you may proceed.
Sure. I did review, well, first of all, kidney stones are what's called nephrolithiasis, are extremely painful, often acute pain conditions, but there are individuals who have recurrent kidney stones or even chronic pain related to kidney stones. So it's not an insignificant condition. There's no cure per se that I'm aware of. I'm obviously not a urologist or a nephrologist, but I do occasionally see these patients in the pediatric population. So it's a significant painful disorder. The challenge with this application is whether cannabinoids or medical marijuana is effective for I guess in this case it would be reducing incidence of kidney stones or the treatment of pain in kidney stones during the acute period of time. The petitioner supplied one article, which was really a review of a large data set. And I reviewed the literature on PubMed, which is a large database of scientific literature. There were only two other manuscripts I could find looking at either kidney stones or nephrolithiasis and cross-referencing it with either cannabis, marijuana, or cannabinoids. And one was probably irrelevant because it talked about an association with a specific syndrome related to cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, the article that the petitioner provided. And then there's one review article talking about the effect of cannabinoids on the kidneys. That article covers a lot of ground, and both looks at the theoretical benefits and risks of cannabinoid use on the kidneys in general. The article, this review article does mention the specific article that the petitioner referenced and does, acknowledge, as is stated in the article, that there is some evidence provided by this article that there is a reduction of risk of kidney stones. Again, this is an epidemiologic article, so it's looking at large populations in males who have a certain amount of marijuana use between 1 and 7 times per week. This doesn't take into account, anybody with the type of renal disease the petitioner is discussing. But I will note the final mention of this article in the review article says these results do not provide strong evidence, but can be taken into consideration. And their concern is that the results only show a difference in males and do not show an association between decreased kidney stones in individuals who use marijuana more than 7 times a week. So, given the frequency of kidney stones in people, this should not be something that we base our decision on one supporting article, in my opinion. That this would be relatively easy, frankly, to study if somebody wanted to, I would expect there'd be more data if we were going to really consider this strongly. I would note if this patient has chronic pain related to recurrent kidney stones, they are eligible for medical cannabis based on previous certification. So it doesn't eliminate this particular petitioner's ability to receive medical cannabis. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
It's Dr. Prywis. Yeah, I would second that, Bill. Thing that I looked at is, I also looked at the literature. I couldn't really see anything specific to either renal calculi or sponge kidney, but I just wanted to echo that it seems that some of these petitions, the reason that they are interested in medical cannabis seems to be for chronic pain. And if that's the case, I think at the time of their submission, we should be very clear if that's it, because as Bill mentioned, as we all are aware, we have already approved chronic conditions of 6 months or more of pain. So if that's the main issue, why applicants are submitting petitions, I think we should make that clear from the start, because they've already have access to that they may not be aware of. So just wanted to make that point.
Dr. Berry, and then Dr. Prosen, I think.
I echo what everyone has said. I think the actual form needs to be updated, and so that there could be a triage mechanism that says, is the primary basis of this or the secondary basis due to chronic pain. Because as soon as I read it, I was like, this person would qualify under those conditions, because, and this is everyone knows I got to do this annually. We don't have enough data. We could have data because we have people taking it and they may have kidney stones, and we just don't have a mechanism to assess this. And so we're making decisions about a disease that could affect a lot of other people, because also kidney function is impaired in this patient population. And so if they're on other medications, we have no documentation if they, what would be the impact of cannabis if they were taking it for a prolonged period of time, certain modes of taking, I read different types of routes of taking it could affect kidney function. And so the balance there is very individual. And so I think if the chronic pain is the issue, they would qualify under the chronic pain condition that's already been approved. Whereas I think, we don't have enough data. I don't think cannabis is a preventative treatment in terms of preventing the calculi or preventing urine infection. In this context, there isn't any data that indicates that. So I had to read between the lines and presume that it's the pain that is the issue for this applicant, and maybe for many other patients.
Yeah, if I could comment again, Dr. Prywis, really the primary indications, at least in my experience with this, is pain or spasticity. Those are the two main indications, medical, for medical cannabis. And if a medical condition has those conditions within it, then I think it's worth looking at. I agree with Linda, is that we can't really, there's just not enough research, nationally, worldwide, to look at individual medical diagnoses apart from the pain and the spasticity for us as a group to look at it and say, yes, it's definitely should be approved. So I would just argue that unless there's a condition that's really related to pain and spasticity, for which there is at least a body of research that we can substantiate, and also looking at what other states are doing, those are the primary types of conditions we should be evaluating.
Okay, Dr. Prosen.
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm convergent with everyone else. Many patients with MSK have no symptoms. The symptoms that are relevant from the literature are exactly what people said: kidney stones, back pain, abdominal pain. And if that's the issue, then it's chronic intractable pain for more than 6 months, and they're already covered. But there's nothing really to suggest that any cannabinoid compounds are helpful with the primary disease, either in terms of preventing progress or treating it. So I don't quite see the rationale either.
Okay, Dr. Salner, I think you had a comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I agree. I also reviewed the literature and would suspect that the petitioner has a pain issue. The only question that I have is, since these renal stones really are characterized by acute pain, and there are multiple acute pain episodes as opposed to one single chronic pain episode that lasts 6 months, might it be possible that they don't qualify because they really don't have one single chronic pain that goes for 6 months or more? They have multiple episodes of acute pain, which therefore might not qualify under the existing conditions, and therefore we might consider this condition as a qualifying condition because the pain is more acute.
But wouldn't recurrent episodes of acute pain potentially qualify as a chronic condition?
It's a chronic condition, but it's not a chronic pain in one location. I suppose if you just said the patient has chronic intermittent pain generated by renal calculi, then yes. But if you said, is it one particular pain? Well, no, sometimes it's on the left, sometimes it's on the right, sometimes it's in the flank, sometimes it's in the back. So I'm just a speculation that
Oh, sorry. Dr. Berry.
I'm going to give a counterpoint. Chronic pain is chronic pain, and we do not want to get into micromanaging individuals because, I've been very frank. I have chronic pain syndrome, and it's wherever it wants to be on any given day. So I do not think we're in a situation, and it's very individualistic, right? I think, the person, the medical case that's made for this person is between the patient and their doctor. And I think chronic pain is big enough that a series of acute can be, made the case because it's due to a chronic syndrome at the end of the day. Because I think if you start getting into locations, the frequency, we could do that for all the conditions that come before us, and we would go down a rabbit hole that has no ending, in my perspective.
Yeah, I would echo that. As someone who treats chronic pain in my practice for 35 years, I've experienced patients who've had acute episodes, but I still qualify them as chronic pain. So, if you have pain that's recurrent, in my view, whether it's acute episodes, it's ongoing, it's chronic pain. So I would agree with Linda. I think that if you go to your practitioner and you're saying, I'm having these episodes, and I want to be on a medical cannabis program, and I can't take opioids and I can't take other medications, and I need something, I'm sure that practitioner or being referred to a practitioner would definitely consider them for registration.
Dr.
And
Zemsky.
I'm
Dr.
so
Berry.
sorry. So sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill. I just also want to say, if that is a case, Andrew, that you want to make in the future, then that could be a subcategory for chronic pain. That we potentially. I mean, I feel like this is not about the disease; it's about pain specifically.
Sure, and I entirely agree. I just wanted to make the point that some patients with this condition may have pain once a month, one episode a month. They have it chronically, so I agree. Certainly, if I were the certifying physician, I would think that they likely would qualify as under chronic pain. But I just wanted to bring up the point that their pain may be a little bit different, in terms of its timing than other chronic pain patients we see. But I wouldn't have a problem including it either.
So I just want to note that, and I don't want to make any changes right now, but I will say, we approved sickle cell disease before we approved chronic pain. And many patients with sickle cell disease would not qualify for chronic pain, but many do. But sickle cell disease as an entity is approved. We may want to, but sickle cell disease is a recurrent or chronic pain condition. What we may want to consider in the future, I'm not sure we want to do that today, is adding recurrent, coming up with a definition of what recurrent pain is. I wouldn't want to specifically approve this condition given the lack of data, but we might in the future want to consider recurrent pain syndromes that might not totally fit into that chronic pain syndrome. Just some food for thought.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction, Bill, because, if someone has acute pain and it's just one episode, that wouldn't qualify them to go to their physician and say, I want medical cannabis for my kidney stones, and then they pass the kidney stones, and that's no longer an issue. So yeah, I think the distinction with, recurrent acute pain versus just one or two episodes.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? All right, then I think that we can proceed to a vote on the condition. And as you know, there are 4 criteria that have to be met to adopt the condition. And so I will go through each of those 4 questions. First, is this medical condition, medical treatment or disease debilitating? So I would just say all those for yes, raise your hand, or
Yes. Yes.
and the second question is were there any no's? I'm sorry on that. Okay. Any abstentions? Don't think so. The second question is marijuana more likely than not to have the potential to be beneficial to treat or alleviate the debilitation associated with the medical condition, medical treatment, or disease? All those for yes, please raise your hand. 1, 2, okay. And all those are no.
No.
1 no. And then any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to comment, my reasoning for voting yes was more on the chronic, because of the chronic pain condition, not the specific kidney condition. So,
Yep.
so not,
So,
So maybe-
I'm gonna change my vote to an abstention too, because I think it's not really clear.
I think I'd like to do that as well, actually.
Yeah,
Okay.
just,
I
Okay.
just want to clarify, Commissioner, when you asked that question, because again, we're interpreting it different ways. Is the question related to the condition versus the symptoms, which I think
It is the
why you get-
condition. So yes, Dr. Berry, and thank you for pointing that out. And I think what I've heard from your discussion this morning is that, and it's about MSK, or the medullary sponge kidney disease. So this question is particular to, is marijuana more likely than not to have a potential to be beneficial to treat that condition that is the subject of the petition? So in light of that clarification, I will retake the vote on question number 2. And all those that do believe that marijuana is more likely than not to have the potential to be beneficial to MSK, yes. All those who believe it is, raise your hand or say yes. So then I don't have any yeses. So all those that don't believe it.
no,
Okay.
no.
Oh, so 3 no's. And then any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay.
Yeah, just because the evidence isn't there yet, but it might be.
And that's my rationale too.
Then I don't think we proceed with the other 2 questions because we need all 4 to be yes. But if there are, yeah, that we don't. So this petition is then denied. So.
But can we make sure to qualify how the we redirect the premise of the petition if it's related to pain?
Correct.
I just want that to be documented because I don't want the impression that we're dismissing, these debilitating symptoms.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, the
No.
third question is, are there other matters that the board considers relevant to the approval or the denial of the petition? And so there is an attachment here, but I believe that would be the case where if you believe that there are relevant matters to the denial. So are there other matters? I guess I'll ask this then. Are there other matters that this board believes are relevant to the approval or denial of the petition? All those
Yes.
that believe there, yes.
Yes.
So
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
any opposed to that? Okay. And so now, Dr. Berry, for the record, did you want to qualify what is relevant to the denial of the petition?
It seems to me the highlighting of kidney stones, nephrolithiasis, and UTI, urinary tract infections, which can be painful as well, were the prominent symptoms of this disease process that propelled the person to apply. And so I think they can fit under the chronic pain condition, which is covered by the medical marijuana program in that scenario.
Okay. Any additional relevant matters that the other board members would like to comment on with regard to the denial of this condition? Dr.
Yeah,
Pearlson.
just to add to what Dr. Barry said, that when the cysts rupture, people can have acute unpleasant back and abdominal pain in addition to the kidney stone pain. So that just amplifies it slightly.
Okay. And Dr. Berry.
I'm sorry, just to also add, there did not appear to be sufficient evidence in the literature to indicate that, medical marijuana will actually be preventative or treat the stones. And secondly, we have no evidence of the impact on renal function long-term. So, I think in that, those were two other issues that I wanted to substantiate denial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other relevant matters that board members would like to put on the record in terms of, with regard to the denial? Okay. And then for the record, the fourth question was if the debilitating condition is qualifying for a patient under the 18 years of age, does it have an effect on brain development? But this is not relevant, seeing as that you have found that it does not. We answered no to question number 2. So, so the petition then would not be approved, and the condition would not be recommended to treat this specific disease based on all the comments and the vote that was just taken. The next item of business would be the next meeting, which would be scheduled at a later date. You can be contacted.
Commissioner, I have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm just curious, was this petition submitted by a patient, a practitioner, an organization? We never really got that. I just was curious about it.
I can answer to that.
Okay.
It was submitted by a patient or yes, a patient.
So the patient
Individual.
submitted that research paper that we received.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Tina.
Yep.
All right. Is there any other business, any other new business that the board, for the good of the order, that anybody would like to bring up or address?
I just had an informational question,
Sure.
which is, outside of the tax issue, is it still the case that in the state of Connecticut that medical cannabis is available in forms and concentrations that are different than those for adult use?
Yes, I think Lila can speak to those specifics, but yes, they are.
Yes, that is correct. There are carve-outs for certain type of dosages that are medical, not dosages, routes of administration that would be considered medical only. So think of things like intravenous injection. I think it's like pills, things of the like that. And so it's specifically carved out in our policies and procedures. And then in terms of the concentration, We do have a concentration cap for adult use, but that is not applicable for medical products. So they can be any THC concentration.
Thanks, that's really helpful.
Lila, I have a question for you too. I want to understand the mechanism when patients go to the dispensary. It's always been my understanding that they meet with a pharmacist, and that's what makes our program unique to other programs around the country. But I've been under the impression from talking to several people that is really more of a voluntary access rather than something that's mandatory in the medical program. Can you speak to that? Because as a physician, I'm concerned about patients not getting the proper management with some of the products that they receive in the dispensary. And I was always under the impression that the pharmacist would be kind of the gatekeeper within the dispensary to help them kind of organize that, look at their medications and so forth, and make sure that they're being properly dosed with the proper product. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, that is correct. And that is the way that it should be traditionally functioning. So my understanding is that when a patient is looking to be certified, they will go into the dispensary hybrid facility, and the dispensary/hybrid facility will assist them with their application with the department. So typically the way that the process works is that they would be certified for a physician, and then they would go into the dispensary/hybrid facility, and they would sit down. They'd have an initial consult with the pharmacist, who would then help them fill out the form and sort of get them on their initial pathway. In terms of follow-up treatment, the pharmacist is obviously always there to assist with dosage, as well as quantities and amounts. But I think on the follow-up side, the consultation is less of a process, because they've already had that consultation. So the pharmacist is really there for follow-up. I will say that we require that all of the medical product be dispensed by a pharmacist. So they're going in, they're checking the PDMP before they do the dispensation, and they're dispensing it to the patient. So they still have a pretty key and integral role. Obviously, you can't force the patient to engage with the pharmacist all the time in the way that maybe we would like them to. But I do think our facilities at least provide that initial point of contact and consultation.
Is it generally a requirement though when they get their medical registration that they meet? I mean, is that kind of a requirement that the first stage of this process is that they should meet? They can't just go into the dispensary and order the products, or they or is that set up for them once they registered? And the other follow-up question is, does each dispensary have a minimum amount of pharmacists? Because I know that some dispensaries have more than others.
So to answer the minimum amount of pharmacists question, you're right that some have more than others. And again, there's a ratio that would apply. I believe it mimics that of the pharmacy ratio. And so if it's a busier facility, they may have more pharmacists on staff. The current law requires them to always have a pharmacist on staff 40 hours a week. And then in terms of the actual requirement for the initial consults, the one thing I will say, it's a little bit more of a gray area, because when we it's part of their standard operating procedures. So for many of our hybrid facilities, when they receive their license in the RFA, and that's the request for application, that was part of their operating procedures, and that was taken into account when we gave them their license. And so it was sort of one of these things that I don't want to say was a condition upon their license, but it was something that factored into the selection of that facility for their license. But in terms of whether or not it's a mandatory requirement in the regulations as existing, I don't believe that it is, but there is a requirement for a consultation space, and I believe there's a requirement that they make themselves available for consultations when necessary.
Okay, well, thank you for those clarifications, Lila. Any other matters that the board would like to discuss now that we're in, seems to be our annual meeting?
I'm sorry, I have another question for Lila, and it's really on behalf of my patients.
Okay.
One of the concerns that I'm hearing, and I don't know if other practitioners who've registered patients have had this concern, is that they find that a lot of the products on the medical end that they would like to obtain are not always available, that there always seems to be higher concentrations of THC, which is more for the adult use, that's always available. But yet some of the kind of more desirable products on the medical end, some of these dispensaries have run out of products, and they're not available for weeks on end. And to try to circumvent that, I've recommended that patients, because we now know that they can go to other dispensaries having their registration card. So even though it may be a little bit of a hassle to travel outside of their region, that they could contact other dispensaries to see if that's available. But apart from that, I was just wondering, is there a concern that you're finding with other dispensaries that they're running out of some of the more desirable medical products, that they just don't, maybe they're just not making enough of them, and they seem to be more geared on the profit side for the adult use? So that seems, I mean, I wouldn't even raise this if it wasn't an issue, but I've heard this time and time again on registering patients. So I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, we have heard that as a concern as well. There isn't a legal mechanism that exists currently within RERACA or policies and procedures that would require the production of specific product for our medical folks. That being said, we have where the issue sort of stems is on that manufacturing growing side, and we do have some new growers coming online, and we expect that that is going to help alleviate some of the issue. I think the concern might be flipped. You had said higher concentration products, so those are available only in the medical realm, and so if it's a lower concentration product, what we are seeing is that there is more of that available because they're making it for both markets. The one thing I will also flag is that it does look like there is some pending legislation to modify those concentration caps, which may maybe fuel a little bit more of production for that higher concentration product. Because they will be raised a little bit more, and so that may help that as well. I don't know if that's going to pass, but that is in, I believe, some of the draft legislation that we've seen. But we're continuing to monitor that issue, and obviously medical patients are certainly, for me, are a priority because I grew up in the medical program. And as we, we're constantly looking at that as an issue, and whether or not it's just one of these things where maybe they're not recognizing the branding name, but it's the same product, or if it truly is an issue where there's more supply for our adult use folks. But hopefully with the new folks coming online, growing additional product, and with that modification in the legislature to those concentration caps, that might alleviate some of the concern and some of that issue as we go forward.
Well, that's good to hear. Just to qualify, it's not just the high-end THC products. It's actually the products that are in combination with CBD and CBG and THC. Those are more desirable, particularly for certain types of conditions, which also involve insomnia and pain. So it's those kinds of, and they may be in pill form, they may be in other forms. So it's not just those. I mean, I'm much more concerned about patients starting, especially new patients starting on the program in high THC combinations. The general rule in medical cannabis is start low and start slow. So, you know, I'm always concerned about that. But thank you for mentioning, and I hope that it does improve.
Dr. Berry?
I just wanted to amplify that because I think if you're a novice being exposed to this and it's to have a lower dose option. I actually said this when we made it legal in the state. Is there ever going to be that tug of war between the medical population and those who are general consumers, and how do you prioritize it? And I think, you know, there's a higher emphasis on the higher concentrations versus if someone, you know, has intractable pain and they're being introduced to this, they should have the same options, and so that it can be titrated as needed. So I just want to make sure to advocate for that patient subgroup. And then, you know, this is the thing that I've always had a conflict as a physician, is that a pharmacist is making dosage recommendations. Now, if I write a prescription, let's say for an antibiotic, I write the prescription, not the CVS guy, right? The guy at CVS has a piece of paper and he's going to explain to you all of the side effects. We don't have that system. And I feel like, I'm sorry, I have to do, it's like an annual tradition. We have the data and the capacity, right? But we probably don't have the money because, you know, we're making decisions based on articles that we get from Europe, you know, piecing together anecdotal commentary, whereas, you know, I know for a fact that if you go to a dispensary and the pharmacist, they're not ask, do they take your weight? Do they ask you for a list of medications that you're on to see if there are any, and even if they did, they wouldn't know. So what is the advice that the dispensary pharmacist is giving in the context of the medical condition that brought that person to the dispensary, right? It's not following the model that we have for other medications. And so at some point, it would be great to have a discussion about what it looks like. Maybe have a pharmacist come and talk to us and see, you know, how do they provide advice? What are the issues that they have? So that as we're approving all these conditions, we're doing it in good faith that on the other end, they have the tools and the capacity to advise a patient, because the doctors are not really part of this equation for the most part. I think Dr. Price is the unique person, but a lot of people get referred and then the management of their care is all through the dispensary, their pain or whatever the reason they're on the cannabis.
Yeah. To those points, I just want to flag a couple things. Going back to the low dose products, there is a provision in the law, and it's not as robust as I think people on this call would probably like it to be, but it does require that facilities take reasonable efforts to supply those types of products. And I get like what is reasonable efforts and the like, but there is a nod to that in the legislation, and whether that could be more robust is certainly probably a question for our folks over at the Capitol. And then adding to that, you know, pharmacist physician dichotomy, I will say that I do believe there's an option for physicians to put some recommendations around their certification. That being said, I'm not sure that a lot of physicians in this field do that. And what you are identifying is something that's been identified as a national trend of, you know, figuring out how to move from that certification piece of the physicians and get that care to the patients, kind of like a gap in care. I will say that while, you know, a pharmacist is not a physician, I think Connecticut is unique in bridging that gap because there are other states where it's just a bartender, right? And so, and that's not disparaging to a bartender, but it's not someone with a pharmaceutical background or any sort of medical background, and it's certification to that just regular individual. So at least in Connecticut, we do have a little bit more of a bridge with that pharmacist, which I think is very helpful. But for sure, what you are identifying is, you know, something that I think all regulators talk about on a national level of how to get that care to the patient and sort of bridge it in this area where we have physicians that are certifying in a unique space, but it's much different than, you know, regular medical treatment where they're treating them for a specific condition and they're prescribing and sending it to a pharmacy. It's just a certification for cannabis. And then, you know, what does that dosage look like? That doesn't really seem to work. Or be part of that care when we're talking about certifying physicians. So, I mean, there's certainly ways to, I think it would be fruitful to have a discussion about, and I think the medical community would appreciate it as well, to discuss just about how we better improve that care for the patient, and how we make sure that that experience is medical in nature and more akin to what they're experiencing when they go in to see, you know, a doctor for a normal condition.
To that point, if I may, Linda, I think the larger issue is that the majority of physicians in this country have little to no knowledge about medical cannabis. And the bigger issue is medical education. Physicians need to receive medical education. And just I would throw out, I'm a member, and you can all join, there's no charge, of the Society for Cannabis Clinicians. And this is a national body of not just physicians, but practitioners. And they have continuing medical education, they have courses. That's just one resource. There's many more resources. I mean, this is obvious. I've been involved with this, like you, probably 8 years or more. And I've been involved on a national level with my Academy of PM&R, with other physicians who practice medical cannabis across the country, to educate our colleagues. And I will tell you, there is an enormous amount of interest. There's chairmen of departments who are standing in standing room only rooms that we lecture to. So there's a demand, there's a need, but it's on a state-by-state basis what is required of a physician to be able to have the knowledge to recommend, if anything. And so I hear your point about leaving it up to the pharmacists to try to figure out what they need. Obviously, they're much more familiar with the specific products than we are, because they're dealing with it. But I think it's really important for us, whether you're the one who's referring them to the dispensary and registering them or not. I just think that medical cannabis is an area that is growing and changing constantly with research around the world. And there are global conferences on this too. So I think the bigger picture is the medical education piece of it. And so I'm glad that we have.
I don't want to I keep cutting Bill off. I know he has to say something, but I want to I'm going to pat myself on the back because I taught a class on medical marijuana at our med school. And it is not an easy thing to teach because there's a lack of data. And there are also ethical issues about many physicians don't want to be that hands-on because they don't know we don't have the data of like if there are any complications that opens up people to liability. And so we need, as on the medical side, to have a real fruitful conversation. And that's why I say having data would be so helpful, because I think if you knew that it could treat kidney stones and you knew the interactions with the medication, a doctor might be more hands-on. So even if we taught it in medical school, because we have to now, because it may show up in your clinic that someone is taking it on a recreational basis. And so what does that look like, when you're getting ready for surgery or such? But we still don't have enough data. Even the way to study is so constrained. I don't know if it's changed, but a couple of years ago, you could only get the plant from a federally funded facility in Mississippi, and you could only get it in a certain form. You couldn't get it in, a powder form, a vape form. It had to be, and that's not how people take it. So even the studies that are done in the States don't even mimic the way patients use cannabis. So, if we're going to teach medical students, we want to teach it so that it looks like what they're going to see when they interact with the patients. And I think that's the other issue. I think when you're teaching as a CME for practicing physicians, you're seeing it on the other end. But I think the scientific data that would be great to have, so we have some standardization in a curriculum, is still lacking. Sorry, Bill.
Okay, Dr. Zebsky.
Yeah, so, as this conversation is going on, this program has been in existence for quite some time. And every year we get numbers data, but what we don't get is any data on quality initiatives, any data on patient satisfaction. I mean, these are things that we, in the hospital setting, we have coming through all the time to evaluate programs. And that's something that we don't have, maybe you do, but we don't have a lens on at all. I don't know if that's required, but it should be if it's not. And, what are the quality initiatives? There are a lot of questions. And I do think, with the number of questions that just brought up by this group who's fairly informed about the program, I think maybe getting some more data, more information, and maybe in our next meeting, as folks have suggested, getting either some dispensary owners, pharmacists, et cetera, at the table so we can have these discussions with the people who are doing this every day.
Yeah, I think, and that I was going to suggest that the conversation was a little lively and I didn't want to stop it. But, a lot of great points. And I think that an informational session would be very helpful for this group, not only to meet with some pharmacists, but to talk to them about how they operate, but possibly some training, for the pharmacists or kind of expansion on that. And to meet with some of the owners or operators of the retail and just as importantly, the grow facilities. And I will tell you that, it is a very, rapidly changing landscape. And I think it would be very helpful and eye-opening for you to have those conversations that we could help coordinate. In terms of the product, we have implored the growers, the producers, in particular the four original ones who grew up in the medical field, that to serve the patients, to make sure that they hear the concerns and that the products that they want and need, their medicine that continues to be available for them. That it's, as Lila pointed out, there are no stringent laws or regulations that require it, but I will tell you the Capitol is hearing the same thing that you are. And so, as Lila did also flag, there is some pending legislation, but there's a lot of legislation that's pending this session, as always, but about cannabis. And, some of it does have to do with the medical side of things. And so I think that there will be some good progress, whether albeit incremental, to help address some of the concerns that you have brought up. So we don't need to wait until there's another petition. We can schedule that in the meantime, but after session would make the most sense to see how everything shakes out. But either sometime in the summer or early fall, in my mind, makes sense. But I think it would be very helpful to inform this group, to have some recommendations come out of it. We don't have, patient surveys or feedback like hospitals do. You do have to remember that we are a lean and a mighty organization here, but we don't have, we do a lot with every person that is working here, and there's a great breadth of things that happen at this agency in addition to cannabis too. So we are trying, and we hear you. So I do want to just say, thank you, because I know this takes a lot of your time, and you are all so committed to this programming and have put so many hours into it, and you continue to do so. And really, I don't think that you get the recognition and thanks that you deserve. And so it's good to see you, and I really do appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say I shared a few references with the group. There are at least two. I can give you many, many more, but these are two excellent resources. Two colleagues of mine, Dr. Sulak and Dr. Kogan, who's actually director of GW Integrative Medicine program. He's a geriatrician who's also a medical cannabis clinician and also the Society for Cannabis Clinicians resource. But I would welcome a discussion with the pharmacists at our next session. I think that's a great idea. Maybe even some of the growers or people who are also involved in the industry too, because there seems to be to my account, some differences from dispensary to dispensary, how it's organized. Yeah, so that would be great if we had an opportunity.
Yeah, my understanding is that some of the dispensary owners are now having their own groweries. So there's a kind of illusion between the two sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember early on in our inception, we had an opportunity for some of us to visit one of the growing sites. I think it was down in the near the Westport area, and that was very illuminating to be able to see how it's processed and to what lengths they take to make sure of the purity of the products that our patients receive. I don't know if that's something that we might want to consider in the future for our group. But
if you are interested, they are more than happy to really showcase their facilities. They are impressive and they are very welcoming and would I think very much appreciate the opportunity to host you as a group. So we can also set that up.
That would be great. Yeah, because I've been to other tours in Colorado just to compare, and I think we're doing really an excellent job of ensuring the quality of the products here. So
yeah, agree.
Okay. Well, good. So it looks like we won't wait a year to see each other. So you'll be receiving some follow-ups from us on this, and if there's nothing else, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Enjoy your summer. We'll be talking to you soon. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you,
as well.
Thank you, you
Take
too.
care, everybody.
Thank you.
Take
Okay.
Bye-bye.
care.